It's great to be with you today. My name is Jason Adkins. I am the Executive Director of the Minnesota Catholic Conference. The Catholic Conference is the conference of bishops, much like the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. We are the local version of that, and we gather the 7 active bishops and to strategize and to devise policies and promote policies at the state and federal level that serve the common good and promote human dignity. And I think the first question that I'm often asked when I go out into the public or even speak to many Catholic groups is, what does the church as an institution have, what role does the church have to play as a religious institution in the formation of civil laws? I think that's a fair question. In America, we have this thing called the separation of church and state, or at least that's what they tell us. And people are wondering, why is a religious community imposing its values on the rest of the public? And I think that gets to the heart of an issue that we as Catholics have to recognize and understand and be able to give a really cogent response to. And the reason that the church is out there speaking about public issues is it because as the church has a responsibility, Catholics and Christians have a responsibility to be our brother's keeper. This is a religious obligation and a faith obligation we have to help the people, help our neighbor, help the stranger, do what we can to promote human dignity and the common good. And we do that in a number of ways. We do that through the works of mercy. We do that in our own homes, in our families, in our workplaces, but we also do it in the public arena. We live in a Republican government, a democratic society where we gather together in the activity of politics to promote laws and justice and things that promote human flourishing. This is a very important task and is part of who we are as Catholics and Christians and our responsibility. We do this because laws have an important role in promoting what I call the moral ecology. Just as we want to produce and have things in the environment that promote the animal species and the animal kingdom and help them grow and flourish and do well, the same thing goes with human beings. And we want to create an ecology, an environment where human persons can flourish as well. And laws have an instrumental role in doing just that. When we participate in the public square as Catholics, we are always proposing what we think is right and just and good. We are never imposing anything. We understand that we as Catholics have a right to speak, but we also have a responsibility to speak in ways that are accessible to those who don't share our faith or even outside of the religious traditions. So just like anyone else who participates in the legislature or in the public arena to speak about public policy issues, we have to do so in a way that's accessible to others. But we're always proposing. We don't impose anything, and we have to convince others of the truth and the justice of that which we are promoting. Religious participation in the public arena has been a long and venerable component of American political history. All the great civil rights movements have been defined by and really run by people of faith. Everything from the abolition of slavery to the civil rights movement in the 1960s, led by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a Baptist minister and theologian, and the pro-life movement today. The great civil rights movements in our history were always led by people of faith. The participation of religious people in public life is one of our most cherished traditions. The separation of church and state was not meant to protect the public from people like you and me. The separation of church and state was meant to ensure that the government stayed out of the affairs of religious bodies and churches, because the founders understood that religion played an important and indispensable role in providing the moral, human, and social capital necessary for a free society to exist. And without that moral capital, without that voice of conscience, you could not have a free government and a free society, because if people don't order themselves, the state would have to step in and provide that mechanism of order. And you could say that that's sort of a parable for today, right? As people have lost the ability to self-govern, what has happened? You have the expansive growth of the state. So moral virtue and limited constitutional government are deeply connected. And that leads me to the topic of the day, which is the issue of marriage, and marriages in the institution of marriage and its indispensable role as a primary civilizing force in our society. Why is marriage something that's so obvious, a feature of human life and human society? Why are we out there as a church, as a body, and joining with other people of faith, defending an institution? Why should we even need to do this? Well, it's because marriage is under attack. It's under attack in the law, it's under attack in our courts, and it's under attack in our culture. And it's not just marriage being a broader attack on human sexuality, the human person. These are tremendous challenges that we're facing, but marriage is, in fact, the institution of marriage, the gift of marriage, is under attack in our society. Marriage, not to put too fine a point on it, but marriage, it's a civilizational defining issue in many ways, because marriage is the principal civilizing force in any society. If we look to the compendium of the social doctrine of the church, there's a whole section, chapter 5, which focuses on marriage and the indispensable role of marriages and families as the building block of any society. So when we say that marriage is under attack, we should recognize that not only is marriage under attack, but civilization is really under attack. That's what's going on, is this civilizing force, this deep and beautiful gift of marriage and family life. As the church calls it, the domestic church, the school of peace, a community of virtues, where people grow and become better persons. They learn to have solidarity with their neighbor. They learn to care for others. They learn to love. They learn to live in community. They learn to grow in faith. This institution is under attack. And some people say, well, we have so many important things going on that we're working on. There's an economy that's in trouble. We have 50 million people on food stamps. We have a healthcare crisis. We have a budget crisis, et cetera, et cetera. Why are we spending so much time working on marriage? Why are we making marriage a priority? I get a lot of interesting comments and reactions, as you can imagine, because I'm out there working with the bishops and talking publicly about the importance of this issue. And even Catholics we're hearing from saying, oh boy, why is this not a number one priority? That's assuming they even agree with us. They're disagreeing about making the defense of marriage a number one priority. And I think that's a telling remark, because what it shows is that people have lost a true understanding of the importance of marriage and what it is. Implicitly, they either disagree with us about preserving marriage and protecting marriage, or they don't see marriage for what it is and having a vital importance to the rest of society and not just the well-being of two people. It's because there's this cultural understanding of marriage, that marriage is fundamentally about the love and commitment between two people. It's a private matter. And I think many Catholics have bought into this assumption that's been told to us in the culture, that this is a private matter between two consenting adults who love each other. And with such a dominant cultural understanding such as that, it is absolutely no surprise that same-sex couples, for instance, or any other types of relationships, those people are seeking to be married. Because fundamentally, the culture understands marriage as the relationship of two consenting parties who love each other. As you may have heard, love and commitment equals marriage. Well, love and commitment does not equal marriage. Love and commitment is necessary for marriage, but love and commitment is not sufficient for marriage. And it's certainly not why the government gets involved in marriage in the first place. The government has no interest in regulating the loving and committed relationships between two people. I'm in a loving, committed relationship with lots of people, but I'm not married to all of them, and neither are you. So the point of this whole thing is that, again, laws they provide and shape our moral ecology, and laws have a public purpose, and marriage has a public purpose, and that's what we really need to talk about and understand as we participate in this conversation. And I'll get into a little bit more about that, why marriage is an important public good, a basic good of human society, what that means, and why it needs to be defended. But we have to be very clear at the outset that marriage is an important social good. It's not just a private relationship between two parties. We can't just say, as Catholics, that we believe in the sacrament of marriage, we adhere to the sacrament of marriage and the truths of that, but the civil order can do what it wishes. Absolutely not. Laws have a vital social and pedagogical function. They promote the common good, and that is why we need to be out there advocating for good laws that serve human dignity and the common good. What's going on politically that has necessitated a marriage protection amendment? The Minnesota Catholic Conference advocated vigorously this past year, I'm sure you've read about it in the newspapers, along with some other groups, for a marriage protection amendment to be placed on the ballot in November 2012. So all Minnesotans in November 2012 will have the opportunity to vote yes or no to a constitutional amendment that says, in Minnesota, only the union of one man and one woman shall be valid or recognized as marriage. This is a pretty simple proposition. You may have heard this is called the Anti-Gay Marriage Amendment. I don't see anything about gay marriage in that amendment. This is a useful rhetorical tactic for the other side to condemn people and to paint people who support marriage as bigots, haters, people fomenting discrimination. And that's, of course, a useful rhetorical tactic for that side. But in fact, it's not true at all. This is about preserving the vital institution of marriage in our society. The vital good of marriage is the union of one man and one woman, because frankly, it's under attack. Groups like the Catholic Conference and the Catholic Church, Minnesota Family Council, the National Organization for Marriage, the many other groups, religious and secular, who are promoting this, are doing so not because we don't have anything better to do and we want to hate on gay people. I'd rather not be doing this. I'd rather not be showing up on random blogs and people trying to expose every aspect of my private life. We'd all rather be doing something else than defending something so obvious as important as the good of marriage. But unfortunately, these are the times we live in, and this is the task that we've been given, and this is the defense of marriage that we will pursue. So it's an important issue, but it's because marriage is under attack in the courts and in the law. Just next week, the Minnesota Court of Appeals will hear a case involving a number of same-sex couples who will try to have Minnesota's Defense of Marriage Act declared unconstitutional. And their argument that Minnesota's marriage laws are unconstitutional is based on the fact that, in their view, traditional marriage laws are nothing but the irrational bigotry of religious people who use marriage law as an opportunity to discriminate against gay people. This is a shocking statement on some level, given that the good of marriage has been around a long time, and religious views about marriage have been around a long time and not associated in any way with a particular teaching about homosexuality or gays and lesbians. But be that as it may, that's the argument. That should concern us on a number of levels. One, it points out that the argument in its substance is that the participation of religious people in public life is fundamentally irrational. And if religious people promote and support certain laws, they do so only because of irrational bigotry on their part. Religion can never be reasonable, so to speak. The second troubling thing about that assertion is that our marriage laws have a strong public and rational basis, which I'll get into in a moment. But be that as it may, the fact is that what we see next week in the Minnesota Court of Appeals, I'm excited to see how much media coverage that case will get. I'm not sure it's going to get much at all, but you should pay attention to that next Wednesday and Thursday. Marriage is under attack in our courts. It's also under attack in our legislatures. For a number of years, pieces of legislation have been introduced to redefine marriage or to eliminate it altogether and substitute a parallel system of civil unions. So this is a profound shift. When we say redefine marriage, marriage currently is defined as a union of one man and one woman. That's as old as Minnesota's days as a territory, but really as old as civilization itself. What folks are trying to do is redefine marriage from the union of one man and one woman into the union of two consenting adults. Now, what's the big deal, you might say? Well, if we're going to define marriage as the union of two consenting adults, what's the rational basis for limiting it to two consenting adults? Well, there really isn't any. If marriage is the love and commitment between two people, there's no reason it can't be the love and commitment of three people or four people or five people. And when we do that, well, what we'll end up doing is creating a system of love licenses. And that's what marriage will be, a government-sanctioned love license. And you know what? People will eventually say, this is pointless. I don't need a government love license. Why bother entering into this institution at all? And so marriage is not just redefined in that context, it's undefined. We're defining marriage down, we're defining marriage out of existence. And this is profoundly troubling, as I'll explain in a moment, because marriage is, again, an important public good, and I'll go into some of the reasons why it is an important good and why we want to preserve it and protect it and invite people in our society to enter into this union.